If this happens, the narcissist is still obsessed with you, and I want to begin with the word obsessed, because it is carrying something specific in this title that deserves honest examination before we go anywhere near the signs. Obsessed is a strong word, a precise word, and using it accurately rather than dramatically requires being clear about what narcissistic obsession actually is and what it is not, because the confusion between the two is one of the most consistently consequential confusions available in the aftermath of a narcissistic relationship. Narcissistic obsession is not love in the form that obsession sometimes takes in ordinary romantic attachment. The specific, personally directed, you as an individual preoccupation that genuine deep feeling produces. It is not the obsession of someone who cannot stop thinking about you because who you are specifically has taken hold of their interior life in a way that organizes their experience around you. That version of obsession, however complicated and however difficult to navigate, is at least organized around you as a person. Narcissistic obsession is organized around something different. It is organized around what you represent in the supply economics, around what your specific presence or absence does to the construction's functioning, around the specific regulatory resource. Your particular combination of qualities provides that the narcissist system has discovered it cannot easily source elsewhere. It is obsession with a specific function that you perform in the narcissist's psychological economy. And the distinction between being obsessed with as a person and being obsessed with as a function matters enormously for how the signs of the obsession are received and what they mean for the person on the receiving end of them. Let's establish what produces the obsession in the first place, because understanding its origin is what makes its signs legible rather than simply surprising. The narcissist's supply-seeking mechanism, as we have established in previous conversations, runs a continuous assessment of the supply landscape, monitoring former and current supply sources, evaluating their potential, calibrating the investment required for engagement, producing the output that determines whether reaching is supply economically rational. Most former supply sources move through the mechanism's assessment in a predictable way. They are initially monitored with some attention. The attention gradually reduces as the supply economics of new sources occupy the mechanism's resources more urgently, and they eventually settle into the background of the monitoring as sources whose potential has been evaluated and whose current status is not requiring active management. This is the ordinary trajectory. The source that produces the obsession does not follow this trajectory. The source that produces the obsession is the one whose assessment consistently and specifically fails to produce the stable, settled, this has been evaluated and filed output that the mechanism produces for the ordinary former supply source. Instead, the assessment keeps returning to the source, keeps finding something in the evaluation that does not resolve into the stable, settled output, keeps generating the specific, persistent, unresolved quality of attention that the mechanism directs at things whose supply economics have not been successfully incorporated into the current arrangement. And this returning, this unresolved quality of attention, this specific failure to settle the assessment into a stable filed output, that is the obsession, not a conscious choice, a mechanism's response to an unresolved supply economics question. And the unresolved quality of the question is produced by the specific, non-fungible, irreplaceable thing you provided that the mechanism's assessment consistently cannot find an adequate substitute for. Now let's talk about the signs. And I want to be clear about what the signs actually indicate before naming them, because the indication matters more than the naming. The signs indicate the obsession. The obsession indicates the supply economics question is unresolved. The unresolved supply economics question indicates the non-fungible quality of what you provided. None of this indicates that the obsession is love. None of this indicates that the obsession produces change. None of this indicates that the obsession is a reason to re-engage, or to soften the distance, or to receive the reaching that some of the signs produce with anything other than the clear-eyed understanding of what the reaching is organized around. The signs are information. Specifically, they are information that confirms something you may have already known about the relationship. That what you provided was specific and genuine and not easily replaceable. That confirmation has value. It does not change what is appropriate going forward. The first sign is the monitoring that exceeds what ordinary post-relationship background tracking produces. We have discussed the narcissist monitoring in previous conversations. The continuous background information gathering attention that former supply sources receive as a matter of the mechanism's ordinary functioning. What the obsession produces is different from this background monitoring in specific, observable ways. It is more active, more frequent, more specifically targeted at information about you rather than at the general landscape of which you are one element. It shows up in social media behavior that is specific and consistent, not the occasional interaction that the background monitoring produces, but a pattern of attention that has a regularity and a specificity that the background monitoring does not have. It shows up in the information gathering through mutual connections that has a quality of urgency, questions that are too specifically about you to be casual, interest in details of your current life that exceeds what ordinary post-relationship curiosity would produce. It shows up in the specific, targeted quality of whatever indirect contact occurs, the interaction that is too precisely aimed at something you posted, too specifically timed to something that happened in your life, too accurately directed at the specific frequencies of your current experience to be the product of the general awareness that the background monitoring provides. The excess, the specific quality of more than the background monitoring produces, is the first sign. The second sign is the one that is most directly observable to the people in the shared social world who have access to both the narcissist and the person the obsession is directed at. It is the specific, persistent presence of you in the narcissist's conversational content, the frequency with which your name or your situation or the history of the relationship finds its way into the narcissist's conversations with mutual connections in ways that exceed what the ordinary post-relationship narrative management would require. The ordinary narrative management references the former supply source in specific, controlled, purpose-driven ways, in the service of the counter-narrative, in the specific contexts where the narrative requires maintenance. The obsession produces a different quality of reference, less controlled, less purpose-driven, more spontaneous in its arising, more specifically about you as a subject of genuine preoccupation, rather than as a character in a narrative that requires management. The mutual connections who observe this pattern, who notice that you come up more than the ordinary post-relationship narrative management would require, more than the specific contexts that require narrative maintenance would explain, are observing the obsession's most socially visible expression. And the excess of your presence in the narcissist's conversational content, beyond what the narrative management requires, is the second sign. The third sign, and the ones that follow it through to the most specific and most personally directed expressions of the obsession, and what all of them together mean for the person who is recognizing them, that is exactly where we are going next. The third sign is the one that arrives most directly and is therefore the most difficult to misread, though it is also the one most frequently rationalized into something other than what it is by the person on the receiving end of it. It is the contact that has no adequate explanation other than the obsession, not the contact that is framed as something else. The casual reaching, the pretext-organized message, the mutual connections relay of information that could plausibly be coincidental. The contact that arrives without sufficient framing to disguise what it is. That comes through at an hour or in a register, or with a content that the ordinary post-relationship contact management would not produce. That carries the specific, unmanaged quality of something that the mechanism is generating without the usual strategic organization, because the obsession has been producing enough internal pressure that the pressure is overriding the calibration. This contact is recognizable not because of what it says, but because of what it lacks, the specific quality of management that the narcissist's ordinary contact always carries. The management is the tell. Its absence is the sign. The fourth sign is the one that appears in the narcissist's behavior toward the people you are closest to. The specific, targeted attention that the people in your inner circle receive from the narcissist that exceeds what their independent relationship with the narcissist would warrant. The friend who suddenly finds the narcissist more interested in maintaining contact than the friendship's history would explain. The family member who notices the narcissist's questions about you have a specificity and a persistence that casual concern would not produce. The colleague whose connection to you makes them the recipient of a quality of narcissist attention that their own relationship with the narcissist does not account for. All of these are the obsession finding alternative channels to the information it is seeking, channels that the direct monitoring is not providing with sufficient specificity. The people closest to you are the people whose access to you is most complete, and the obsession's attention to them is the mechanism's attempt to access what the direct monitoring cannot adequately reach. The fifth sign is internal to the narcissist's behavior in contexts that have nothing directly to do with you, and it is therefore the hardest to observe but the most revealing when it is observed. It is the specific deterioration in the quality of the narcissist's functioning in situations where the obsession's unresolved quality is most acutely present. The disproportionate reaction, the reduced management capacity, the specific moments where the construction's ordinary efficiency is visibly reduced in ways that correspond to triggers that are connected, however indirectly, to you or to the relationship or to the specific territory the obsession is organized around. The person who encounters the narcissist in these moments and has the framework to read what they are observing sees something that the narcissist's ordinary functioning does not show: the specific cost that the unresolved obsession is extracting from the construction's general resource availability. The obsession is expensive. It consumes management resources that the construction's ordinary functioning requires for other purposes, and the consumption shows in the specific, contextual reductions in efficiency that the people closest to the narcissist's daily functioning observe, without always being able to identify their source. Now here is what all five signs together mean, and this is the part that requires the most careful and the most honest handling. Because the signs are real. The obsession they indicate is real. The non-fungible quality of what you provided that the obsession confirms is real. And none of that changes what is appropriate for the person who is recognizing the signs to do with the recognition. The signs are not an invitation. They are not evidence that re-engagement would produce something different from what the engagement always produced. They are not grounds for softening the distance or receiving the contact differently or revising the assessment of what the relationship was. They are information. Confirmation of something that deserves to be received clearly and then set aside in favor of the more important question, the question of what you are building in the space the distance has created. Because the obsession is about the narcissist's unresolved supply economics. Your life is about something else entirely. And the recognition of the signs is most useful when it produces not a change in what you are doing in relation to the narcissist, but a deeper understanding of what the relationship actually was and what you actually provided, an understanding that confirms the genuineness of what was real on your side without requiring the obsession's continuation to validate it. You were genuinely something specific and irreplaceable in that dynamic. The obsession is the mechanism's acknowledgement of that. You do not need the mechanism's acknowledgement to know it was true, but having it, clearly understood for what it is, can be the final piece of the picture that allows you to close the chapter completely. Not because the obsession stops, because you have understood it fully enough that it no longer requires your attention, and your attention, freed from the chapter, is available for the life that is waiting, which was always where it was supposed to be.